When my grandson was born with a small deformity in his left leg, I never imagined that that small detail would trigger a devastating series of choices that would mark our lives forever. The way my son John and his wife Margaret looked at their baby in that Boston hospital said it all. It wasn't the look of parents ecstatic at the arrival of a new life. It was a look of disappointment, as if they'd received a defective product they couldn't return. I was there, holding Margaret's hand during the birth, and the first thing she said when she saw little Tyler wasn't an exclamation of love or relief, but a cold whisper to John, "There's something wrong with him." The doctor tried to reassure them, explaining that it was just a congenital malformation that could be corrected with a few surgeries over time, that Tyler could lead a completely normal life. But as he spoke, I saw something in their eyes that chilled my soul. A distance. A detachment. As if they were already calculating how much that imperfect child would cost them in terms of money, time, and most importantly, the image they so cherished. John was a rising executive at a tech company. Margaret a public relations professional who organized events for Massachusetts elite. The idea of a child with special needs simply didn't fit into the perfect script they had written for their lives. In the weeks following the birth, I visited them daily, trying to help with the baby, offering advice, sharing the joy I felt holding my first grandchild. But each time I arrived, I found Tyler alone in his crib for long stretches, while Margaret worked on her laptop at the kitchen table and John barely showed up, always with the excuse of important meetings that couldn't be postponed. When Tyler cried, they delayed attending to him, as if each cry were an unbearable inconvenience. I began to notice small oversights, diapers not changed often enough, forgotten bottles, rushed baths. Nothing that could be considered explicit abuse, but a series of small abandonments that already outlined a disturbing pattern. The tension grew with each visit. I tried to suggest ways to handle the baby more lovingly, offered to spend more time with them, tried to foster some bond between parents and child, but I felt like my words were hitting an invisible glass wall. Margaret would often retreat to another room when I began talking about Tyler's future, about the treatments that could help him, about how he would grow up to be a strong and capable boy. John, for his part, became increasingly distant, arriving home late, leaving early, avoiding even looking at his son. I remember one night, about 2 months after the birth, arriving for an unannounced visit to find Margaret sitting alone in the dark living room, a glass of wine in her hand, staring intently at the baby monitor. Tyler was crying upstairs, a weak cry, as if already knowing there was no point in trying. "He won't stop crying," Margaret said without looking at me. "I've changed him, I've fed him, I've done everything I'm supposed to do. And he just won't stop." I immediately went upstairs to pick Tyler up, to comfort him, to show him that someone cared about his discomfort. When I returned to the living room with him cradled in my arms, now calmer, Margaret looked at us with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration. It was complete emptiness, as if she were looking at two strangers who had invaded her home. "It's never going to be normal, is it?" she asked, her voice flat. "Him. This life. This family. None of this is going to be how we planned." I tried to reason with her, to tell her that families rarely follow perfect plans, that unexpected challenges often bring equally unexpected joys. But I could tell she wasn't really listening. She had already made up her mind. And in that moment, I had a terrible premonition about what was to come. It was a rainy Thursday in October that everything changed. I arrived at their house unannounced, carrying a small teddy bear I'd bought for Tyler, who was already 3 months old. The front door was unlocked, which I found odd. I entered calling for Margaret, but the house was eerily silent. I climbed the stairs to the baby's room, and when I opened the door, the scene I saw was forever etched in my memory. Tyler was in his crib, apparently not having been fed or changed in hours, his little face red from crying, but no longer strong enough to continue. And next to the crib, an open suitcase with some of his clothes folded inside. On the nightstand, an envelope with my name written in Margaret's impeccable handwriting. I ran to pick Tyler up, my heart pounding as I tried to calm him, checking to see if he was okay. With him still in my arms, I opened the envelope and read the letter that would change our lives. "Claire, we know you love Tyler more than we ever could. The truth is, we're not prepared to raise a child with a disability. We have promising careers ahead of us, dreams to fulfill, and Tyler would be a burden neither of us wants to carry. We've signed the papers giving you temporary custody. You'll find them in the kitchen drawer. If you want to keep him, great. If not, we'll understand if you decide to give him up for adoption. We need this fresh start. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the paper. I couldn't believe my own son had abandoned his baby like someone abandoning an unwanted animal on the side of the road. I couldn't believe they had coldly calculated this abandonment, preparing documents, planning to leave when I wasn't around. And most of all, I couldn't believe the cruelty of those words. Tyler would be a burden. A burden. I looked at that innocent little face in my arms, now calmer after receiving some comfort, and swore in that a moment that would never allow him to grow up feeling like a burden. That he would never know that his own parents considered him broken, without hope. The letter fell to the floor as I held Tyler against my chest, rocking him gently, murmuring words of comfort that he was still too young to understand, but that he needed to hear, that I needed to say. I looked around the room, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. The luxurious crib John and Margaret had chosen so carefully during the pregnancy. The cloud and star mobile that spun silently overhead. The expensive knickknacks on the shelves. A whole stage set for a baby, but lacking the essential ingredient, genuine love. And in the midst of it all, Tyler, innocent and vulnerable, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just been abandoned by the two human beings who should have loved him more than anything in the world. Tears streamed down my face as I contemplated the future. I, Claire Thompson, widowed for 5 years, 58, and about to retire as a high school teacher, suddenly found myself responsible for a 3-month-old baby with special medical needs. It was frightening, overwhelming. But looking at that little face now sleeping peacefully in my arms, I knew there was no real choice to be made. This was my grandson. This was my blood. This was now my son. And I would do anything, to ensure he grew up knowing he was loved, valued, and wanted just as he was. I walked downstairs with Tyler held tightly in my arms, tears blurring my vision. In the kitchen, as promised, I found a folder with carefully prepared legal documents. They had thought of everything, consulted lawyers, signed papers giving me temporary custody, all without saying a word to me. I sat at the kitchen table, Tyler finally asleep after I'd given him a bottle I'd found in the fridge, and the full extent of what had happened began to sink in. I, Claire Thompson, widowed for 5 years, was now responsible for a 3-month-old baby with special needs. At 58, when I thought my life would enter a more peaceful phase, I was back at square one of motherhood. But there was no choice. Tyler was my grandson, my flesh and blood, all I had left of my family. If John and Margaret didn't want him, I did. If they didn't see value in that little life, I saw a whole universe of possibilities. The documents in the folder were cold and technical, but they made it clear that John and Margaret had relinquished their parental rights, transferring temporary custody to me with the option of permanent adoption in the future. They included medical information about Tyler's condition, congenital dysplasia of the left leg, which could be significantly improved with proper treatment. There was also a check, written out to Tyler, for $20,000. To help with initial expenses, an enclosed note read, "As if they could put a price on a child. As if they could simply pay to rid themselves of their responsibility." Part of me wanted to tear that check into 1,000 pieces and throw it in the trash. But the practical part, the part that was already thinking about Tyler's future, the doctor's appointments, the treatments, the adaptations I would need to make to my home, that part put the check back in the folder. It wasn't money for me. It was money for Tyler, for his well-being, for his future. And I would use every penny to ensure he had the best possible opportunities. I looked around at the house around me, the luxurious home my son and his wife had built, full of symbols of success and status, but devoid of human warmth. I realized I couldn't stay here, within these walls that had witnessed the abandonment of an innocent child. I needed to take Tyler home, so we could build a new beginning together. Careful not to wake him, I placed Tyler in his stroller. I quickly packed a bag with his diapers, clothes, bottles, everything we would need for the next few days. I found his car seat and installed it in my old Volvo. I grabbed the folder with the documents, the teddy bear I had brought, and took one last look at the house before closing the door. I didn't know if John or Margaret would ever return for their belongings, or if they would simply leave everything behind, as they had their son. Either way, it no longer mattered. My life, Tyler's life, was now heading in a completely different direction. On the way home, as I drove cautiously through the still falling rain, I glanced in the rearview mirror every few seconds to check if Tyler was still asleep. My thoughts were racing. How would I rearrange my home to accommodate a baby? How would I balance my final months as a teacher with the care Tyler would need? How would I financially navigate all the medical challenges that lay ahead? And most profoundly, how would I protect Tyler from the pain of knowing he had been rejected by his own parents? These questions had no easy answers, but one thing I knew for sure: we would do this together. Tyler and I, against the world if necessary. My house was modest compared to John and Margaret's mansion. A two-bedroom house in a quiet middle-class neighborhood, with a small backyard and kind neighbors, mostly retirees and young families. It had been my home for over 30 years, the place where I had raised John, where I had lived with my husband until his death. It was a place full of memories, some painful, many happy, and now it would be the place where Tyler would grow up. When we arrived, the rain had finally stopped. A pale ray of sunshine tried to filter through the clouds, like an omen that, despite the storm, better days would come. I carried Tyler, still asleep, inside, carefully placing him in the center of my bed, surrounding him with pillows to keep him from rolling, while I decided what to do next. I needed to convert the guest room into a nursery as soon as possible. I needed to buy a crib, a changing table, all the things a 3-month-old baby needs. But in that moment, sitting on the edge of the bed watching Tyler sleep, all I could do was cry. Cry for my own son's cruelty, for the pain Tyler would one day feel upon learning the truth, for the loss of the peaceful retirement I had envisioned for myself, for the monumental challenge I now faced. But I also cried with relief, because Tyler was safe, because he was with me, because he would never know the feeling of being unwanted as long as I lived. And finally, I cried with determination. Because there, watching this little being that fate had placed in my care, I vowed I would do everything in my power to ensure he had the best life possible, that he grew up strong, confident, loved, that he would never, ever feel like a burden. The first year was the hardest. I had to adapt my home, quickly transforming the guest room into a nursery. I had to relearn everything about childcare, updating myself on modern diapers, formulas, and vaccines. And most importantly, I had to find medical specialists to treat Tyler's condition. I discovered he had congenital dysplasia in his left leg, a condition that could be significantly improved with early physical therapy and eventual corrective surgery. Instead of despairing over the diagnosis, I dove headfirst into research, joining support groups for families with children with the same condition, and learning exercises I could do at home to help him. My savings, which weren't large, began to be channeled toward Tyler's treatment. I sold some jewelry I had kept and saved wherever I could. My retirement as a high school teacher wasn't generous, but it was stable. We had enough to live with dignity, and most importantly, Tyler had plenty of love. The first few months were a difficult adjustment for both of us. Sleepless nights, constant doctor visits, trying to balance work and baby care. I hired a nanny for a few hours during the day so I could continue teaching until my retirement, which was just a few months away. Nora, a sweet 60-year-old woman who lived down the block, became a valuable ally in this journey, caring for Tyler with the same affection she had for her own grandchildren. The neighbors, surprisingly, were an invaluable source of support. When they learned of the situation, without me sharing all the painful details, simply explaining that I was now caring for my grandson, they organized a sort of belated baby shower, bringing diapers, clothes, toys, and offering practical help. Martha, from next door, made extra meals and left them at my door on days when I was late coming home from Tyler's doctor's appointments. Tom, the retiree across the street, often came by to fix small things around the house, making sure everything was working properly for the baby. It was as if a small community had formed around us, protecting us, supporting us, reminding me that even though John and Margaret had abandoned us, we were not alone in the world. Tyler, despite all the challenges, was an extraordinary baby. His smile, which began appearing around 4 months, lit up the darkest of environments. His blue eyes, so similar to his father's, shone with curiosity about the world. Despite the difficulty with his leg, he developed normally in all other aspects, reaching milestones such as sitting, babbling, and interacting with toys at the expected age or even earlier. The doctors were optimistic. With proper treatment, Tyler could live a virtually normal life, with only slight difficulty walking. I enrolled him in a special aquatic therapy for babies, which seemed to bring him great joy beyond the physical benefits. In the heated pools at the rehabilitation center, Tyler moved with a freedom he didn't have on land, his tiny limbs gradually strengthening under the guidance of experienced therapists. I watched these sessions with a mixture of pride and determination, watching how he struggled, how he smiled as he mastered a new movement. And I thought of the parents who had missed all of this, who had thrown away the chance to witness this miraculous development, this indomitable spirit already manifesting at such a young age. In the first few months, I still harbored the secret hope that John and Margaret would change their minds, that they would call asking about their son, that they would feel remorse for their rash decision. I even tried to contact them a few times, leaving messages that were never answered. Each unanswered attempt was a small stab in the heart, not for me, but for Tyler, who would one day understand that his biological parents had deliberately chosen not to be a part of his life. Little by little, I began to realize that it was better this way. That Tyler would be more protected if he didn't have people in his life who would abandon him in times of trouble. People who saw this as a burden, rather than a gift. I began to rebuild my vision of the future, no longer as a grandmother who would occasionally babysit so his parents could go out, but as the sole parental figure in Tyler's life. It was an overwhelming responsibility, but also incredibly rewarding. Each small victory Tyler had, his first tooth, his first "mama" directed to me, which made me cry for hours after he fell asleep. The first time he managed to roll over on his back by himself, was celebrated with an intensity only a mother-grandmother could feel. About 6 months after assuming Tyler's care, I received an unexpected legal notice. John and Margaret were formally relinquishing custody of Tyler, paving the way for me to legally adopt him as my own. I remember sitting on the couch with that document in my hands, Tyler playing on the rug in front of me, reaching for a colorful rattle with his little hands, and I cried like I hadn't cried since my husband's death. They weren't just tears of sadness at the cruelty of that final act of abandonment, but also of relief knowing that Tyler would be legally protected in my care, that no one could take him from me in the future, and a strange sense of freedom. I would no longer have to wait for a phone call that would never come, no longer have to explain to strangers why Tyler's parents weren't showing up for birthday parties or doctor's appointments. I could build our life together without the shadow of that rejection. And so I did. The adoption was finalized when Tyler was 1.5 years. Officially, I became his mother. In the eyes of the law, John and Margaret were now strangers, people with no legal connection to that smiling child who, despite his physical challenges, was developing amazingly in every other way. The day the adoption was official was celebrated with a small chocolate cake, Tyler's favorite, and a silent promise I made to him. You will never be abandoned again. You will never be a burden. You are my joy, my reason for living, my family. The judge presiding over the adoption was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who seemed to understand our unusual situation perfectly. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after signing the final documents, "I deeply admire what you are doing. Not every grandmother would have your courage and dedication." I thanked her, but deep down, I didn't feel I had done anything extraordinary. I had done what any decent person would do. Take responsibility for a helpless being in need of love and protection. The truly extraordinary act, in my opinion, had been the abandonment of John and Margaret. The ability to look at an innocent baby and see him as a burden to be avoided, that was something I would never understand. As Tyler grew, it became increasingly clear that he had inherited not only John's blue eyes but also a keen intelligence and insatiable curiosity. By age 2, he knew every color and shape, spoke in complete sentences, and demonstrated an astonishing memory. By age 3, he had learned to count to 100 and knew the entire alphabet, not just by reciting it but also by recognizing letters in books and signs. His physical therapy continued, now supplemented by specially designed games to strengthen his left leg. A first corrective surgery was planned for when he turned 4, something that caused me anxiety, but which the doctors assured him would be relatively straightforward and with excellent prospects for improvement. At the playground near my home, where I took him almost daily, Tyler quickly became known to the other mothers and children. His slightly unusual gait drew occasional glances, but his bright personality and easy smile quickly made people forget any physical differences. He made friends easily, sharing toys generously and demonstrating an empathy unusual for his age. When a child fell or hurt himself, Tyler was often the first to offer comfort, often repeating the phrases I used with him. "It's going to be okay. You're strong. The pain will pass." It was as if his own experience with discomfort and physical hardship had given him a special sensitivity to the suffering of others. At the same time, he didn't allow his condition to limit him. He climbed slides, swung on swings, and chased balls and other toys as best he could. And when he couldn't do something exactly like the other children, he invented his own way. "Look, Grandma, I found a new way," he would often exclaim, demonstrating some creative adaptation he had found to overcome a difficulty. My heart swelled with pride at each of these small victories, at each display of resilience and ingenuity. Sometimes, watching him play, I found myself thinking of John and Margaret, wondering if they had any idea of the treasure they had discarded, the bright light they had chosen not to have in their lives. Tyler first became aware of his physical difference around the age of 3.5. We were at the playground as usual, and he was watching a slightly older boy running circles around the carousel. "Grandma," he said thoughtfully, "why can't I run like Billy?" The question, so simple and direct, took me by surprise, though I knew it would come someday. I crouched down to his level, looking directly into his curious eyes. "Tyler," I began, choosing my words carefully, "remember how we said we're all different? Some of us have light hair, some dark. Some are tall, some short." He nodded, following my reasoning. "Well, one of the things that makes you special is that your left leg is a little different from your right. That means some things, like running really fast, are harder for you now. But that doesn't mean you can't do those things, just that you do them in your own way, in your own time." Tyler frowned, processing this. "Will my leg always be like this?" he asked. "Not necessarily," I answered honestly. "The doctors we've been seeing are helping your leg get stronger. And when you're a little older, we'll do a special surgery that will help even more. You might not run exactly like Billy, but you'll run your way, and that's just as wonderful." He considered this for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied with the explanation. "Can I go play in the sand now?" he asked, the topic already forgotten in favor of immediate fun. "Of course," I smiled, relieved by how easily he'd accepted the explanation, at least for now. As I watched him happily playing in the sandbox, building elaborate castles with intense concentration, I promised myself I would do everything in my power to ensure Tyler grew up seeing his difference not as a flaw, but as part of who he was, something to be accepted and even celebrated. As Tyler approached his 4th birthday, preparations for his first corrective surgery intensified. There were frequent appointments with the orthopedic surgeon, pre-operative exams, and detailed discussions about procedures and recovery. I tried to prepare Tyler as gently as possible, explaining in age-appropriate terms what would happen, why it was necessary, and how I would help his leg grow stronger. I used children's books about hospital visits and played doctor with him using his dolls as patients, all to familiarize him with the hospital environment and allay his fears. Tyler, with his astonishing intelligence, asked insightful questions. "Will it hurt a lot? Will I be able to see what the doctor is doing? How long will I be in the hospital?" He answered honestly, but always with a dose of optimism. Yes, there would be some pain after the surgery, but the doctors had special medications to help. No, he would be asleep during the procedure, thanks to a magic nap the doctors would give him. We'd probably be in the hospital for a few days, but I'd be with him the whole time, and we could bring his favorite toys. The day before surgery, after packing the small bag we'd take to the hospital, Tyler called me to sit beside him on his bed. "Grandma," he said with a seriousness that seemed out of proportion for his almost 4 years, "I'm a little scared about the surgery." My heart sank, but I maintained my composure. It's normal to be scared, honey. New and unknown things tend to scare us. But know that I'll be there with you the whole time, and the doctors are very, very good at what they do. They'll take great care of you. He nodded, looking a little comforted, then asked something that caught me completely off guard. Why aren't my mom and dad here to help me too? The question, so innocent and direct, felt like a knife in my chest. Until that moment, I had answered Tyler's occasional questions about his parents with simple, vague explanations. They lived far away, couldn't be with us right now, but loved him very much. White lies that seemed appropriate for his young age. But now, seeing the genuine confusion in his eyes, I realized he was beginning to understand that there was something unusual about our situation. That other children had parents present, not just grandparents. I took a deep breath, trying to decide how much to reveal, how much his little heart could handle at this moment, especially on the eve of a frightening procedure. Tyler, I began carefully, families come in all shapes and sizes. Some children have one father and one mother, some have two fathers or two mothers, some have only one parent, and some, like you, have a grandmother as their primary caregiver. I paused, gauging his reaction. He listened intently, so I continued. Your parents weren't prepared to care for you when you were born. They had their own problems and struggles, and they couldn't give you all the love and care you deserved. So they decided it would be best for you to stay with me, because I had so much love to give and was ready to be your family. Tyler processed this for a moment, then asked, They didn't want me because my leg is different? The question hit me like a punch. How, at less than 4 years old, had he come so close to the painful truth? It was amazing and frightening how children could intuit things that were never explicitly told to them. I fought back the tears that threatened to fall. No, Tyler, I lied, deciding to protect him, at least for now. They couldn't care for any child at that moment, no matter what that child was like. It was never about you, it was about their inability. And I was so happy to have the chance to be your family, to care for you, to love you every day. He seemed to consider this deeply, then, to my relief, he nodded and gave me a tight hug. I'm glad you're my family too, Grandma. That night, after Tyler finally fell asleep, I sat on the porch of our small house, gazing at the stars and crying silently. It wasn't just the stress of the impending surgery that overwhelmed me, but the weight of the lie I'd told. A lie born of love, of a desire to protect, but a lie nonetheless. I knew that one day I would have to tell Tyler the full truth, that he deserved to know his own story, no matter how painful. But not now, not at 4 years old, not on the eve of a frightening surgery. Someday, when I was older, stronger emotionally, I would find the right words to explain the inexplicable. How anyone could look at that wonderful boy and see him as a burden. The surgery went well, thank God. The procedure, which lasted nearly 4 hours, partially corrected the deformity in his leg, significantly improving its alignment and function. The days of recovery in the hospital were difficult, with Tyler bravely dealing with the post-operative pain and the frustration of being temporarily immobilized. I stayed by his side constantly, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair next to his bed, reading stories, playing games, anything to distract him from the discomfort and boredom. The medical staff was impressed by his resilience and good humor, often commenting on what a model patient he was, rarely complaining, always grateful, even at 4 years old. You did an incredible job with him, a nurse told me during a shift change. We rarely see children this young handle such a major surgery so well. I thanked him for the compliment, but knew it wasn't just my influence. There was something inherent in Tyler, an inner strength, a quiet determination that seemed to have been born with him. It was as if, somehow, he had transformed his initial rejection into a source of power, rather than fragility. The recovery at home lasted weeks, with Tyler gradually resuming normal activities, now aided by a small brace and an intensive physical therapy program. His joy when he was able to take his first steps without significant pain was contagious. Grandma, look. I'm walking almost normally, he exclaimed, walking down the hallway with much less of a limp than before. We celebrated every progress, no matter how small, with the seriousness it deserved. A firmer step, a full lap around the playground, the ability to climb stairs without gripping the railing too tightly. Each of these achievements was a small miracle that reminded us of how far we had come together. And each time I saw Tyler overcome another obstacle, I felt a pang of renewed anger toward John and Margaret. They had wasted the opportunity to witness this extraordinary journey, to be part of this story of overcoming adversity, all because they failed to see beyond their narrow vision of what a perfect family should be. By the time Tyler turned 5, he was almost unrecognizable from the baby who had been abandoned 2 years earlier. Physically, though he still had a slight difficulty walking, he moved with much greater ease and confidence. Cognitively, he was years ahead of his preschool peers, reading fluently, fascinated by numbers and scientific facts, absorbing knowledge at a speed that sometimes made me dizzy. Emotionally, he was a secure, loving, and surprisingly empathetic child, often more concerned with the feelings of others than his own. Preschool was another important milestone. Initially, I was apprehensive about how Tyler would be received by the other children, whether he would be teased because of his slight difficulty walking. I spoke with the principal and his teacher before school started, briefly explaining his situation and asking them to be alert for any signs of bullying. But my worries soon proved unnecessary. Tyler, with his brilliant intellect and engaging personality, quickly became one of the most popular children in the class. His teacher, Mrs. Jenkins, called me after the first week to share an observation. "Mrs. Thompson, I've never seen anything like it. Tyler has a special way of relating to the other children. When they notice his walking difference and ask about it, he simply explains, 'I was born with a special leg that we're slowly fixing,' and then changes the subject. No shame, no embarrassment. And the amazing thing is, the other children follow his lead. It's as if he sets the tone for how his condition should be perceived, and everyone around him agrees with that perception." Mrs. Jenkins's observation filled me with pride, but also with profound gratitude for that boy's extraordinary spirit. Somehow, in his childlike wisdom, Tyler had discovered the secret of turning a potential weakness into a strength, of disarming others' curiosity not with defensiveness but with simple honesty and quiet confidence. He didn't define himself by his physical condition, so he didn't allow others to define him by it either. It was in preschool that Tyler's exceptional talent for math and science began to clearly manifest. While other 5-year-olds were learning to count to 20, Tyler was already doing simple addition and subtraction. His fascination with patterns and numbers was evident in everything he did, from the way he arranged his toys to the questions he asked on walks. "Grandma, why do leaves fall in spirals instead of straight lines? If I eat 2 apples a day, how many will I have eaten in a week? How do birds know where to fly in the winter?" Questions that often caught me off guard, forcing me to research answers or honestly admit my ignorance. Tyler never seemed disappointed by my lack of knowledge. On the contrary, he was excited by the opportunity to discover things together. We spent hours at the local library, absorbing books on animals, planets, and mathematics, well beyond the typical level for his age. The librarian, Mr. Harrison, became a valuable ally, setting aside special books for Tyler and occasionally allowing him to take home volumes from the juvenile section, even though he was technically too young for that. "This boy hungers for knowledge," Mr. Harrison once explained to me. "It would be a crime to limit his access to information he is clearly capable of understanding, just because of an arbitrary number of years." Tyler's thirst for knowledge was a constant source of joy for me, even as it challenged me to keep up with his rapidly evolving interests. But it also made me wonder, had this brilliant mind been adequately nurtured by John and Margaret? Or had it been stifled by their limited expectations, by their desire for a normal child who would fit neatly into their meticulously crafted plans? At the end of that school year, the preschool director requested a meeting with me. I was initially concerned that Tyler had encountered some issue he hadn't shared with me. Instead, I learned that the teaching staff wanted to discuss the possibility of him skipping kindergarten and going directly to 1st grade when he turned 6. "Academically, he's far ahead of his peers," the director explained. "Keeping Tyler in the grade appropriate for his chronological age could result in boredom and underachievement. On the other hand, we need to carefully consider the social and emotional aspects of placing him with older children, especially considering his physical challenges." I left that meeting with much to consider. I consulted child development experts, spoke with the school psychologist, and most importantly, discussed the decision with Tyler himself in an age-appropriate manner. How would you feel about being in a class with slightly older children? I asked. Tyler considered the matter with the seriousness that characterized his reflections on important matters. I think that would be cool, he finally replied. The kids in my class sometimes think the things I want to talk about are silly. Maybe older kids like talking about planets and big numbers like I do. His answer, so honest and self-aware, helped me make the decision. The following fall, Tyler started first grade instead of kindergarten, facing new academic challenges that finally seemed appropriate for his intellectual level. And, to my relief, he adapted socially with surprising ease, finding friends who shared his interests and didn't seem to mind his slightly younger age or his distinctive walk. It was around this time, when Tyler was 6, that I began to notice his interest in computers and technology. One day, while picking up the mail, I found a flyer from a local store advertising an introductory programming course for children ages 7 and up. Normally, I would have dismissed the flyer without much thought, but something compelled me to show it to Tyler when he returned from school. His eyes lit up as he read the description. Students would learn basic programming concepts using special software that allowed them to create simple games and animations. "Can we go, Grandma? Please?" he begged, his enthusiasm palpable. I explained that the course was for slightly older children, but I promised to call to see if they would make an exception, considering his advanced skills. To my surprise and delight, the instructor agreed to let Tyler participate after a brief phone interview to assess his level of understanding and interest. On the morning of the first day of class, Tyler was so excited he barely ate breakfast. He wore his favorite t-shirt, blue with a rocket ship, and repeatedly checked to make sure we had enough time to arrive on time. I watched him enter the classroom with a mixture of pride and that twinge of anxiety every mother feels when watching her child tackle something new alone. 2 hours later, when I returned to pick him up, the transformation was evident. His eyes sparkled, his words came in rapid-fire torrents as he told me about variables, loops, and commands. Concepts I barely understood but which had clearly captivated him. "Grandma, it's like magic, but better, because you make the rules," he exclaimed. The instructor, a young programmer named Alex, approached with a smile. "Your grandson is extraordinary, Mrs. Thompson. He not only followed the class but asked questions that some of my teenage students wouldn't think to ask. I think we've just discovered a natural talent." That 8-week course was just the beginning. Tyler absorbed programming and technology knowledge with the same impressive speed he learned everything else, but with one crucial difference. In this area, his passion was even more evident. At home, he spent hours practicing what he learned, using an old laptop I managed to buy at a thrift store. Watching him work was fascinating. His intense concentration, his persistence when something didn't work as expected, the explosion of joy when he finally solved a problem. It was as if he had found his element, the field where his natural abilities could flourish without restriction. At the same time, Tyler continued his physical therapy sessions and regular medical checkups. His second corrective surgery was scheduled for when he turned 7. Doctors were optimistic about the results, especially considering the success of the first intervention and Tyler's commitment to the recommended exercises. His physical condition, while still present, no longer seemed to define his identity or limit his possibilities. It was just a part of who he was, not the whole. It was during this period that Tyler's questions about his biological parents began to become more frequent and specific. What was my dad like? Did he also like computers? Did my mom have blue eyes like mine? Do they live very, very far away? Can we visit them someday? Each question was like a tiny needle in my heart. I knew I needed to answer honestly, within the limits of what I considered age-appropriate, but it was a fine line between protecting him from the pain of rejection and respecting his right to know his own story. The first time Tyler asked me about his biological parents was when he was 8 years old. We were driving back from a particularly difficult doctor's appointment, where we'd learned he'd need another corrective surgery, his third. He sat quietly in the back seat of the car, staring out the window at the Boston streets he loved so much. Then, without any preamble, he asked, "Grandma, why didn't my mom and dad want me?" That question, so direct and so filled with pain, caught me completely off guard. For years I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsing answers in my mind, trying to find words that would shield Tyler from the cruelty of the truth without lying to him. But in that moment, with his curious eyes staring at me in the rearview mirror, all the rehearsed answers seemed inadequate. I stopped the car in a small park on the way home. We needed this face-to-face conversation. We sat on a bench beneath a large maple tree, the autumn leaves falling around us like golden tears. "Tyler," I began, choosing each word carefully. "Sometimes adults make decisions that are difficult to understand. Your biological parents, John and Margaret, felt they couldn't care for you the way you deserved. They were at a point in their lives where they didn't feel prepared for the challenges of raising a special child like you." Tyler looked at me with that intensity that always surprised me in someone so young. "Is it because of my leg? They didn't want me because I'm broken." That word, broken, hit me like a physical blow. It was exactly how Margaret had referred to him in that terrible letter. And somehow, even without ever reading those words, Tyler had captured exactly the feeling behind abandonment. "Tyler, listen to me very carefully," I said, holding his little hands in mine. "You're not broken. You're perfectly Tyler, exactly as you should be. Your leg is just a small part of who you are, like my gray hair is a small part of who I am. Your parents couldn't see past that small part to see the amazing boy you are. That says a lot more about them than it does about you." He was silent for a moment, processing my words with that impressive mind of his. Then, with a wisdom that took my breath away, he said, "So they lost, didn't they? Because you won me, and I won you." I couldn't help the tears that streamed freely down my face. "Exactly, my love. We both won." From that conversation on, Tyler rarely mentioned his biological parents. It was as if, having gotten the answer he needed, he'd put that question in a closed box in his mind, preferring to focus on the present and the future we were building together. And what a brilliant future he built. As he entered adolescence, his aptitude for technology became evident. At 12, he got his first computer, the result of months of saving the small allowance I managed to give him. It was love at first sight. Tyler spent hours programming, teaching himself coding languages, creating little games and apps that he proudly showed me, even though I barely understood what I was seeing. I encouraged this passion as best I could, enrolling him in summer programming courses, buying technical books that he devoured in days, and taking him to science and technology fairs whenever possible. Every penny I spent was an investment in his future, and Tyler repaid me with exemplary grades and a determination that filled me with pride. By the time he turned 15, his leg was significantly better. After the third and most successful surgery, followed by months of intensive physical therapy, Tyler could walk with almost no limp. He still experienced occasional pain, especially after long periods of standing, but he had learned to manage it. His physical condition no longer defined his life as it once had. It was around this time that Tyler began working seriously on a project that would change everything: an assistance app for people with physical disabilities. The idea stemmed from his own experience, from the small and large challenges he had faced over the years. The app would combine maps with information about the accessibility of establishments, allow users to share tips and reviews about accessible locations, and include an emergency function to request help when needed. Tyler worked on the project every night and weekend, often staying up late, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he coded. I watched with a mixture of admiration and concern, proud of his dedication, but also worried that he was pushing himself too hard. "Tyler, you need to rest," I would say, setting a mug of hot chocolate beside his computer. "Just one more hour, Grandma. I'm almost done with this part," he would reply, never taking his eyes off the screen. "The app needs to be perfect. I want it to really help people like me." That, like me, always caught me off guard. After all these years, after all the progress he had made, Tyler still identified as a person with a disability. But not as someone broken or pitiful. as someone who understood the struggles and wanted to do something concrete to improve the lives of others. He had transformed his difference into a purpose, something many adults never achieve in a lifetime. When Tyler turned 17, his app, which he named Access Path, was ready for beta testing. With my help, he secured a small grant from a local foundation that supported young entrepreneurs, allowing him to hire a designer to create a more professional interface. The experimental launch was an immediate success in the local disability community. Non-profit organizations began contacting him, interested in partnerships. A local newspaper ran a short story about the young coding genius who is making Boston more accessible. Tyler was beaming, but for me, the most incredible thing wasn't the app's success, but seeing my grandson's growing confidence, the sparkle in his eyes when he talked about the project's next steps, the way he carried himself in meetings with adults interested in his creation, without any trace of the insecurity he once felt because of his condition. The real turning point came when Tyler was 18, a senior in high school. A prominent venture capitalist saw the article about Access Path and contacted me, interested in learning more about the app and its young creator. Tyler was more nervous than I'd ever seen him, spending hours choosing what to wear to the meeting, rehearsing his presentation with me late into the night. What if he thinks I'm too young, Grandma? What if he doesn't take my work seriously because of my age? Tyler, I replied, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. This man wouldn't schedule a meeting if he wasn't genuinely interested. He already saw something special in you and your work. Now you just need to show him the passion and intelligence I see every day. The meeting lasted 3 hours, much longer than expected. When Tyler returned home, his eyes sparkled in a way I'd never seen before. He wants to invest, Grandma. Not just invest, he wants to be a mentor. He wants to help me expand Access Path nationwide. He said he's never seen anything so promising created by someone so young. It was one of the happiest moments of our lives. We celebrated with a special dinner at the small neighborhood Italian restaurant, allowing ourselves the luxury of ordering appetizers, main courses, and dessert, a rare treat on our tight budget. Tyler talked non-stop throughout dinner, sharing the plans the investor, Mr. Richards, had for the app, the improvements they could implement, the market potential he saw. I just smiled, letting his excitement wash over me, feeling a pride so overwhelming it felt like my chest couldn't contain it. That night, as Tyler slept, exhausted from the day's excitement, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, looking at the photos of him scattered across the walls and shelves. The helpless baby who had been abandoned. The resilient child who had endured painful surgeries and treatments. The determined teenager who turned adversity into opportunity. And now, the young adult on the verge of extraordinary success. At every stage, in every photo, there was one constant, those bright blue eyes, full of life and curiosity. The same eyes John and Margaret had rejected, considered too heavy a burden to bear. How could they not have seen the treasure they were abandoning? With Mr. Richards' investment, Tyler was able to form a small team to work on Access Path. He decided to defer college for a year to dedicate himself fully to the project, a decision I fully supported. Even with several prestigious universities offering scholarships, including MIT, which had been his childhood dream, Tyler felt this was the time to capitalize on the momentum the app was gaining. The college will be there next year, Grandma, he told me. This opportunity is unique. The newly formed company's office was just a few blocks from our house, in a modern co-working space that looked like something out of a futuristic movie, with glass walls, colorful lights, and young creatives everywhere. Tyler flourished in that environment. For the first time, he was surrounded by people who shared his passion for technology, who spoke his language, who saw him first as a brilliant programmer and only later noticed his slight difficulty walking. In the months that followed, Access Path grew exponentially. The app was relaunched with a completely new interface, additional features, and a targeted marketing campaign that quickly attracted tens of thousands of users. National disability organizations endorsed the app, further increasing its visibility. Tyler worked tirelessly, often arriving home after midnight, exhausted but happy. I worried about his health, about the stress of this new life, but I also recognized that I had never seen him so fulfilled. It was as if he had finally found his place in the world, a place where he was valued not despite his difference, but in part because of it, for the unique perspective it afforded him. It was approximately 6 months after Access Patha's relaunch that the big opportunity arose. A tech giant, one of the largest companies in the world, expressed interest in acquiring the app and the technology behind it. The initial offer was $5 million, a figure that left Tyler and his small team in shock. Mr. Richards, ever the shrewd mentor, advised them not to accept immediately. Your app is worth more, much more. They're just testing the waters. Negotiations dragged on for weeks. Tyler practically lived at the office during this time, returning home only to shower and change. I followed everything remotely, trying to offer support without interfering, feeling simultaneously proud and a little lost in this new world of high finance and corporate negotiations. Finally, one Sunday morning, Tyler came home earlier than usual. I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring intently into the cup of coffee in front of him, an enigmatic smile on his face. "Tyler, is everything okay?" I asked, concerned by his unusual silence. He looked up at me, and I saw unshed tears glistening in that intense blue. "They raised the offer, Grandma. $8.3 million. $8.3 million. And I accepted." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. $8,300,000. An incomprehensible amount to us, who had lived counting pennies for years, who celebrated small victories like being able to pay all the bills each month and still save for Tyler's next medical treatment. I sat slowly in the chair across from him, trying to process the information. "Tyler, this is incredible," I finally managed to say. He nodded, still with that same strange smile, as if he himself couldn't believe what was happening. "You know what this means, Grandma? It means you'll never have to worry about money again. We'll never have to choose between paying the rent and buying medicine again. It means you can finally truly retire, travel, do all the things you've always wanted." I shook my head, tears now flowing freely. "Tyler, I never cared about those things. All I ever wanted was to see you happy and fulfilled. And look at you now. So young, and you've already accomplished more than most people do in a lifetime." He stood up and came to me, kneeling beside me like he used to when he was a child, wanting to tell me an important secret. "Grandma, if I've accomplished anything in life, it's because you believed in me when no one else did. Because you never saw me as a burden, never treated me as broken. You gave me a home, you gave me love, you gave me opportunities. This money is as much yours as it is mine." We hugged there in the kitchen, crying together, not just for this unexpected financial victory, but for the entire journey we'd traveled, for all the obstacles overcome, for every moment we could have given up, but chose to keep going. In the weeks that followed, our lives changed dramatically. News of the acquisition became public, and suddenly, Tyler was a celebrity in the tech world. Newspapers and magazines wanted to interview him. Television shows invited him to tell his inspiring story. Universities that had previously offered him scholarships now wanted to hire him as a speaker. It was surreal to see my grandson, whom I still remembered as a helpless baby abandoned in a crib, now appearing on national television, speaking with the confidence of a seasoned executive about technological innovation and inclusive entrepreneurship. In every interview, Tyler made a point of mentioning me, of recounting how he had been raised by his grandmother after difficult family circumstances, as he diplomatically referred to abandonment. He never mentioned John and Margaret by name, never publicly exposed the cruelty they had committed. It was as if, in his generosity of spirit, he had decided to shield them from the public judgment they would surely face if the full story came to light. I admired his discretion, though secretly I sometimes wished the world knew exactly what those two had thrown away, the precious jewel they had failed to recognize. With the money from the app sales, Tyler insisted we move to a better place. We left our small 2-bedroom rental apartment and bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house with a backyard in a quiet, safe neighborhood in Boston. It wasn't anything fancy. Tyler could have bought a mansion if he'd wanted, but it was perfect for us. Comfortable, welcoming, with enough space for him to have his own office and for me to finally have that reading room I'd always dreamed of. He also set up a fund to secure my retirement, so I'd never have to worry about financial matters again. And most moving of all, he established a foundation in my name, the Claire Thompson Foundation, dedicated to helping grandparents who, like me, found themselves raising grandchildren in difficult circumstances. Life seemed perfect. Tyler decided to resume his college plans, accepting the MIT scholarship he'd deferred. At 20, he was an unusual freshman, already a millionaire, already a success story in the business world. But in many ways, he was just a young man excited by the opportunity to learn, to expand his horizons, to build new dreams. It was in the third month of our first semester at MIT that the past we had long since left behind suddenly resurfaced in our lives. I was at home, organizing some books in my new reading room, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, but I thought it might be a delivery or perhaps a neighbor. When I opened the door, it took me a few seconds to recognize the man standing before me. Older, with wrinkles around his eyes and gray streaks at his temples, but undeniably John, my son. The son I hadn't seen in almost 20 years, who had completely disappeared from our lives after abandoning his own son. I stood paralyzed, unable to speak or move. "Hello, Mom," he said, his voice bringing back memories I had tried to bury deep within. "Can I come in? I think we need to talk." I don't know how long I stood there, in shock, staring at this familiar stranger at my door. Finally, I stepped aside, allowing him to enter. It wasn't a gesture of welcome, but of stunned surprise. John walked past me and into the living room, looking around curiously. "Nice house," he commented, as if we were old friends who hadn't seen each other in a few weeks. Not a son who had abandoned a sick baby and disappeared for 2 decades. "What do you want, John?" I finally managed to ask, my voice firmer than I expected. He turned to me, and for a moment I saw Tyler's own blue eyes reflected in those eyes. The resemblance was uncanny. "I saw Tyler on TV last week," he said simply. "Morning show, talking about assistive technology." I couldn't believe it when the host said his name, Thompson. My last name. And then, when I looked closer, it was like looking at myself at 20. John paused, as if expecting some comment from me. When I remained silent, he continued, "I did some research after that. The story of the app he sold for millions, all that. It's impressive." "Impressive," I repeated, incredulous at his casualness. "You abandon your child because he has a disability, disappear for 20 years, and all you have to say when you find out he's become a brilliant, successful young man is, impressive?" The anger he'd held back for so long was boiling over, threatening to boil over. John had the decency to look embarrassed. "I know what we did was terrible, Mom. There's no excuse. We weren't prepared for a child with special needs." "Stop," I interrupted, raising my hand. "Don't you dare use that excuse. There's no excuse. Thousands of young parents receive difficult news about their children every day, and they don't abandon them like they're defective objects. Don't even give me that 'we were young' talk. You were 28, John. You were a grown man who chose to abandon your son because he didn't fit the perfect image you had for your life." John looked away, clearly uncomfortable with my bluntness. There was a moment of tense silence before he spoke again. "You're right, of course. It was unforgivable. But we, Margaret and I think maybe it's time to try to make things right. To get to know Tyler. He's our son after all." It was like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water over me. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of those words, left me momentarily speechless. When I finally responded, my voice trembled with indignation. "Your son? You waived that right the moment you signed those papers giving me custody. Legally, Tyler is my son now. I adopted him, remember? And emotionally, I'm the only mother he's ever known. As for fixing things, let me guess. You're only interested in getting to know Tyler now that he's rich and famous. Strange how you never tried to fix things when he was undergoing painful surgeries or when we had to count pennies to buy his medicine." John had the audacity to look offended. "It's not fair, Mom. Yes, we saw Tyler in the media, and it made us realize the mistake we made. But it's not about the money. It's because he's our own flesh and blood. We made a terrible mistake, and we want a chance to make amends. I laughed, a mirthless sound. Redeem yourself? You think you can just show up after 20 years, say, "I'm sorry," and everything will be okay? That Tyler will open his arms to the parents who considered him a burden, a broken, hopeless object? Do you remember what you wrote in that letter, John? Because I remember every word. I'm sure Tyler would remember it too if I'd ever had the heart to show it to him. John paled, clearly not expecting I still had the letter. You kept it? He asked quietly. Of course I did, I replied. As legal evidence, in case you ever tried to come back and claim Tyler when I could no longer protect him. And apparently, it was a necessary precaution. John ran a hand through his gray hair, a gesture so familiar that for a painful moment it reminded me of the boy I'd raised, the son I'd loved unconditionally before he became the man capable of such cruelty. Look, Mom, I didn't come here to make trouble. Margaret and I just want a chance. A chance to meet our son. To meet Tyler. To apologize to him in person. He's an adult now, shouldn't he be able to make that decision for himself? I felt a pang of doubt. John was right about one thing. Tyler was an adult now, capable of making his own decisions. I had raised him to be strong, independent, and capable of facing challenges. Would it be fair of me to try to protect him from this, to decide for him whether or not he wanted to meet his biological parents? On the other hand, John's sudden appearance so conveniently after the news of Tyler's financial success seemed extremely suspicious to me. I feared the emotional impact this reunion might have on my grandson, the scars it might reopen. I'll talk to Tyler, I finally decided. It's his decision. If he wants to meet you and Margaret, I won't interfere. But if he doesn't, you'll respect that and walk out of our lives as completely as you did 20 years ago. Got it? John nodded quickly, clearly relieved I hadn't kicked him out immediately. Sure. Fair enough. Here's my card with my phone number. Please tell Tyler that. We're sorry. We really are. I picked up the card mechanically, noticing the elegant logo of a consulting firm and the title, John Thompson, CEO. Apparently, the career he'd sacrificed his son for had flourished. I'll pass on your message, I said coolly. Now, if you don't mind, I need you to leave. This conversation has been exhausting. As soon as John left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs feeling too weak to support me. 20 years. 20 years of absolute silence, and now, magically, they wanted to be a part of Tyler's life. It didn't take a genius to connect the dots between Tyler's newfound fame and wealth and his biological parents' sudden interest. The question was, how to tell Tyler? How to protect him from the potential pain of this reunion without depriving him of the right to make his own decisions. I decided to wait until the weekend, when he would be home from college. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone. For the next 2 days, I could barely eat or sleep, mentally running through different ways to approach the subject, imagining every possible reaction Tyler might have, fearing the emotional consequences of this unexpected development. When Tyler arrived that Saturday, he could immediately tell something was wrong. Grandma, are you okay? You look like you haven't slept in days, he said, concern evident in his voice as he hugged me. I tried to smile, but it must have sounded more like a grimace. I'm fine, honey. There's something important we need to talk about. Something important. Tyler frowned, that focused expression he'd had since he was a child when facing a difficult problem. It sounds serious. Let's sit down. We went into the living room, he carrying his small weekend backpack, me carrying the weight of a revelation that could change everything between us. We sat side by side on the couch, as we had so often over the years for important conversations. Tyler, I began hesitantly, something happened this week. Something I never expected. I took a breath, gathering my courage. Your father, your biological father, John, came to visit me. I saw Tyler's eyes widen in shock, his posture immediately stiffening. For a moment, it seemed he'd even stopped breathing. My father, he repeated finally, his voice barely above a whisper. After all this time. Why? I explained as gently as possible how John had seen Tyler on television, how he had researched his success, how he and Margaret supposedly wanted a chance to redeem themselves, to get to know him. I tried to keep my voice neutral, not wanting to influence his reaction, but I probably failed miserably. The hurt and distrust I felt certainly showed. Tyler listened silently, his face an impenetrable mask. When I finished, he remained silent for so long that I began to worry. Tyler, I called gently. Are you okay? I know it's a lot to process. He finally looked at me, his blue eyes crystal clear, no tears visible. They saw the money, he said simply. It wasn't a question. Probably, I admitted. The timing is suspicious, to say the least. Tyler nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. 20 years of silence, and suddenly, when I'm selling an app for millions, they remember they have a son. His voice was surprisingly calm, but there was a hardness in it I rarely heard. I told John it was your decision, I explained. If you want to meet them, I won't interfere. And if you don't, I promised he'd respect your choice. Tyler stood abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the small garden we'd just planted that spring. His reflection in the glass showed a thoughtful, almost calculating face. You know, Grandma, he said after a long moment, I've always wondered what it would be like to know them. What their voices would be like, their faces, if I'd see anything of myself in them. It's strange growing up without knowing the people who gave you life. My heart sank. Had I failed him somehow? Should I have tried harder to locate John and Margaret over the years, to force them to play some role in Tyler's life, even a small one? I'm sorry, Tyler, I began, but he interrupted me, turning to me with a sad smile. No, Grandma. There's nothing to apologize for. You've always been honest with me about them, as much as possible. I always knew they left me because of my condition, because they thought I was a burden. The word still stung, even after all these years, even coming from the lips of the confident, successful young man Tyler had become. And you know what? He continued. I think I want to meet them. Not for them, but for me. To close this chapter once and for all. I nodded, feeling a mixture of pride in Tyler's maturity and apprehension about what this meeting might bring. If that's what you want, I'll support you. Always. Tyler sat back down beside me, taking my hands in his. Grandma, you're the only mother I've ever known, the only father too. Nothing they say or do will change that. But I think I need to look them in the eyes, understand for myself what kind of people abandon a baby because of a broken leg. Maybe that will help me understand things about myself too. I hugged him tightly, admiring once again the incredible inner strength he had developed. When do you want to do this? I asked when we parted. Tyler thought for a moment. Soon. Before I lose my nerve. Tomorrow, maybe? Could you call him? I agreed, though the thought of talking to John again made my stomach churn. That night, I called the number on the card John had given me. He answered on the second ring, his voice eager upon hearing mine. We arranged lunch the next day at a neutral restaurant downtown. Margaret will be there too, John informed me. We're nervous, but very grateful for the opportunity. I resisted the urge to tell them the opportunity wasn't for them, but for Tyler, and that they didn't deserve his consideration. Instead, I simply confirmed the time and quickly hung up. The next morning, Tyler was surprisingly calm as he prepared for the meeting. He chose simple but elegant clothes, dark jeans, a blue shirt that highlighted his eyes, comfortable shoes that helped with his slight difficulty walking. There was no vanity in him, just a desire to present himself with dignity. Are you sure you don't want me to come along? I asked for the third time as he prepared to leave. Tyler smiled gently. I'm sure, Grandma. This is something I need to do alone. Besides, You've spent enough time with them to last a lifetime, haven't you? I couldn't help but smile at his insight. I promise to tell you everything when I get back, he added, kissing my cheek before leaving. The next 3 hours were the longest of my life. I paced the house, unable to concentrate on anything, wondering how the meeting would go. Had Margaret changed as much as John? Were they genuinely remorseful or just interested in Tyler's new status? And most importantly, how would Tyler feel, finally face to face with the people who had deemed him disposable? When I finally heard the key in the door, I hurried to the foyer. Tyler entered calmly, his face composed but pale. How was it? I asked immediately. He walked past me into the living room, sitting heavily on the sofa before answering. Interesting, he finally said. Very enlightening. I sat beside him, trying to read his expression. Want to tell me? Tyler was silent for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. They're exactly as I imagined, he began. Polished, well-dressed, seemingly successful. John, I can't quite call him my father, owns a consulting firm. Margaret is now an executive at a cosmetics company. They have a house in the suburbs, a luxury car, the right clothes, the expensive watches. The perfect life they planned. There was a bitter note in his voice I rarely heard. They started with elaborate excuses. How they were young and scared, how they weren't prepared for the challenges of raising a child with special needs, how they always regretted their decision but didn't know how to go back after all this time. Tyler paused, a humorless smile curving his lips. And then, so subtly I almost didn't notice the transition, they started talking about how proud they were of what I had accomplished, how they always knew I was special. As if they had some right to that pride, as if they had somehow contributed to who I had become. My blood boiled at their audacity, but I remained silent, letting Tyler continue his story. And then came the questions about the app, about the sale, about exactly how much I received, about my future plans. Margaret even mentioned that she'd always dreamed of having her own product line, that she had some brilliant ideas but never the capital to carry them out. Tyler shook his head in disbelief. They didn't even try to hide it. It was so obvious they were in it for the money that I almost felt sorry for them. Oh, Tyler, I sighed, my heart aching for him. I'm sorry it had to be this way. He shrugged. Actually, it was good. Enlightening, as I said. Part of me always wondered if there was more to the story, if perhaps they had more complex reasons, if perhaps I'd been unfair in my judgments. Now I know better. They are exactly what they seem. Shallow people who abandoned a child who didn't fit into their perfect plans, and who only remembered that child's existence when they saw the possibility of some financial benefit. Tyler leaned back on the couch, looking strangely at peace. I was polite, listened to everything they had to say. And when they finished, I thanked them for lunch, said it had been informative meeting them, and got up to leave. That's when John took my arm and said he hoped we could build a relationship from here, that they could be a family again. Tyler laughed, a short, dry sound. I looked at him and said the only thing that needed to be said. We were never a family. My family is at home waiting for me, probably worried. The woman who held my hand through 3 surgeries, who worked 2 jobs to pay for my medicine, who never, not for a second, saw me as a burden. That's my family. You're just strangers who share some DNA with me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I heard his words. Tyler continued, his voice softer now. Margaret started crying, saying I didn't understand, that they had made a mistake, that they deserved a second chance. John turned red and started talking about blood ties, about how nothing can break the bond between parents and children. Tyler shook his head again. That's when I realized they really didn't understand. They didn't understand that family isn't about DNA or blood ties. It's about who sticks by your side when everyone else walks away. It's about who sees value in you when the world only sees your flaws. He turned to me, his eyes bright with suppressed emotion. So I told them there was nothing more to discuss. That I had no interest in a relationship with people who only remembered my existence when they saw a potential financial advantage. I thank them for one thing. For leaving me with you. For inadvertently giving me the best mother anyone could have. I couldn't hold back the tears any longer. I hugged Tyler tightly, feeling his strong, healthy body against mine, marveling at the incredible man he had become despite everything, or perhaps because of everything we had faced together. "Oh, Tyler," was all I could say through my tears. He gently pulled away, wiping my tears with his thumb as I had done so many times when he was a child. "Don't cry, Grandma. Today was a victory, not a defeat. Today, I finally closed a chapter that had been open for a long time. And I discovered, without a shadow of a doubt, that I already have everything I need." In the days that followed, we waited anxiously for some attempt at contact from John and Margaret. Calls, emails, perhaps even a surprise visit. But nothing came. It was as if, having confirmed that there was no easy money to be made from Tyler, they had decided he was no longer worth their time. Tyler returned to classes at MIT, immersing himself in his studies with renewed energy. If the encounter with his biological parents had shaken him in any way, he didn't show it. On the contrary, he seemed more centered, more sure of himself and his place in the world. As for me, I felt immense relief. The ghost of John and Margaret, the fear that one day they would return to disturb the peace we had built, had finally been exorcised. Tyler was protected not only by the law that legally made him my son, but by his own inner strength, by his clarity about who he was and who the people who truly mattered in his life were. A few weeks later, Tyler came home with a surprise. "Grandma, I've got something in store for us," he announced over dinner. "A Caribbean cruise. 2 weeks, luxury suite with an ocean view. We always talked about taking a big trip together, and we never got the chance. Well, now we do." I looked at him in surprise. "Tyler, that's wonderful, but your studies?" He smiled, that radiant smile that lit up his entire face. "I talked to my teachers. I can submit some work early, some remotely. It's only for 2 weeks, and it'll be during spring break. Come on, Grandma. You deserve this. We deserve it." And so, a month later, we embarked on our first cruise, our first real vacation together. It was a magical experience. Tyler, always so focused on his studies and projects, finally relaxed completely. We swam in crystal-clear waters, explored colorful towns on various islands, dined under the stars, and laughed like we hadn't in a long time. One particularly beautiful night, sitting on the balcony of our suite, watching the moonlit sea, Tyler handed me a small package. "A gift," he said with an enigmatic smile. I carefully opened the package to find a velvet box. Inside, a delicate gold necklace with a tree-shaped pendant, small, sparkling stones representing the fruits. "It's a family tree," Tyler explained softly. "Look closely." I brought the pendant closer and saw, engraved in tiny letters, just 2 names, Claire and Tyler. "Our family," he said. "Small but strong. Everything we need." I immediately put the necklace on, tears blurring my vision once again. "It's perfect, Tyler. Simply perfect." We sat in silence for a while, just enjoying the moment, the sea, the peace we had so hard won. "You know," Tyler said finally, "I've been thinking a lot since that meeting with John and Margaret. About family, about choices, about what really matters in life." He paused, his eyes fixed on the horizon. They looked at a baby with an imperfect leg and saw a burden, something broken, without hope. You looked at that same baby and saw infinite possibilities. The difference wasn't in me. It was in the eyes of the beholder. Tyler turned to me, his face serious. "I realized we all have this choice every day. We can look at the imperfections, the challenges, the obstacles, and see them as insurmountable burdens. Or we can see them as opportunities for growth, for overcoming, for transformation." I nodded, touched by his wisdom. "It's true. And you chose the harder, more courageous path. Instead of letting your condition define you negatively, you turned it into an inspiration to help others." Tyler smiled. "I learned from the best. You could have seen a burden when they dropped a baby on your lap at 58. But you saw a blessing. And because of that choice, 2 lives were saved, mine and yours. I reached out to touch his face, marveling at the man he had become. I won't lie and say it was always easy, I admitted. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, unsure if I was doing the right thing. But never, not for a moment, did I doubt that you were worth every effort, every sacrifice. Tyler covered my hand with his. And that's why I'm determined to continue the legacy you started. The Claire Thompson Foundation is already helping dozens of grandparents raising their grandchildren in difficult circumstances. But I want to do more. I'm developing a new app, one that will help connect non-traditional families with resources, legal support, financial assistance. Because what I learned from you, Grandma, is that family isn't what gives you life. It's what teaches you how to live it. I looked at my grandson, no, my son, with a pride so deep it seemed to overflow from my chest. In that moment, under the starry Caribbean sky, I understood with crystal clarity that it had all been worth it. Every sleepless night, every unpayable bill, every moment of doubt and fear. Because in the end, what had seemed like a tragedy, an abandoned baby, a grandmother unprepared for late motherhood, had turned into the greatest blessing I could have imagined. John and Margaret had thrown away a diamond in the rough, unable to see beyond its superficial imperfections. But I had had the privilege of polishing this diamond, of seeing it shine with its own light, of witnessing its priceless value recognized by the world. And in the process, I had discovered a profound truth about love, that it does not diminish when shared, it multiplies, grows, transforms. That it sees no flaws, but sees potential. That it doesn't count costs, simply gives without reservation. That it, and only it, has the power to transform the saddest stories into the most beautiful tales of overcoming. Today, 5 years after that cruise, Tyler is about to graduate from MIT with top honors. His new company, Family Bridge, helps non-traditional families across the country find the resources and support they need. The Claire Thompson Foundation has grown exponentially, offering everything from financial assistance to counseling for grandparents who, like me, found themselves raising grandchildren in unexpected circumstances. Tyler has expanded his horizons far beyond what I ever imagined, becoming not only a successful entrepreneur but a tireless advocate for inclusion and accessibility. His voice and personal experience lend credibility and strength to his initiatives, inspiring others to see beyond limitations and focus on possibilities. Our life together continues to be a journey of discovery and growth. With each new project Tyler undertakes, each new challenge overcome, we celebrate together, aware of how far we've come since that rainy Thursday when I found an abandoned baby and a cruel letter. The small rented apartment where we struggled to pay the bills has been replaced by a comfortable home where we never want for anything. Sleepless nights worrying about his next medical treatment gave way to lively conversations about technological innovations and philanthropic projects. And the fragile, imperfect baby his own parents rejected grew into an extraordinary man, admired not only for his professional success, but for his intelligence, compassion, and unwavering determination to make a difference in the world. As for John and Margaret, they never tried to contact each other again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their marriage didn't last long after that encounter with Tyler. Perhaps the final rejection of the son they had first rejected was the catalyst for them to face painful truths about themselves and the kind of people they had chosen to be. Or perhaps they simply moved on, as they always had, leaving behind anything or anyone that didn't fit perfectly into their carefully planned lives. For us, that no longer matters. Tyler and I continue on our path, building the family we chose to be, celebrating every victory, big and small, supporting each other through every challenge. Sometimes I catch myself looking at Tyler when he's absorbed in some project, his profile silhouetted against the window light, and I marvel at the journey we've traveled together. At the obstacles we've overcome, the strength we've developed, the love that has grown between us, deeper and more resilient than any blood bond could be. And each morning when I wake up and touch the little tree pendant I never take off my neck, I give thanks for the miracle that is unconditional love, the love that sees beyond imperfections, that sees possibilities where others see limitations, that transforms the abandoned into the loved, the rejected into the celebrated, the broken into the perfectly whole. Tyler's story continues to inspire all who know it. At the last assistive technology conference where he was invited to speak, a young man in the audience raised his hand to ask what the most significant moment in his journey of overcoming adversity had been. Tyler thought for a moment before answering. It wasn't when I sold my first app for millions, nor when I was accepted to MIT, nor even when I successfully completed my surgeries. It was when I realized, at a very young age, that my worth wasn't determined by physical perfection, the approval of others, or ideals imposed by society. It was when I understood, thanks to the example of my grandmother, actually my mother, that we are defined by our choices, our resilience, our ability to turn challenges into opportunities. That we don't have to be normal to be valuable. That our differences can be our greatest gifts. His words deeply touched the audience, many with tears in their eyes as they witnessed not only the story of a successful app, but the human journey behind it. It's this combination, a brilliant technological mind and a compassionate heart shaped by adversity, that makes Tyler such a powerful force for good in the world. He often tells me, half jokingly, half seriously, that he intends to fix the world, one algorithm at a time. And knowing his determination and vision, I have no doubt he'll succeed in doing just that. Next month, Tyler will receive his diploma from MIT, culminating years of dedicated study and hard work. The ceremony will be a moment of immense joy and pride for both of us, but also of reflection on the extraordinary journey that has brought us here. On the eve of his graduation, I plan to give him a special gift, a journal I've kept since that first day I found him alone in his crib. A detailed record of our journey together, the challenges, the triumphs, the moments of doubt and those of radiant hope. I want him to know, in details he may have forgotten or been too young to capture, the story of how two unlikely traveling companions, a middle-aged grandmother and a rejected baby, built a life of meaning, purpose, and extraordinary love. For the future, I know Tyler has big plans. To expand his companies, develop new technologies, broaden the reach of his foundation. But he also has simpler dreams, to travel more with me while we still have time, perhaps one day to find a partner who loves him as unconditionally as I do, to build his own family based on the values he learned, acceptance, perseverance, gratitude for the journey, not just the destination. As for me, at 78, I live each day with profound gratitude for the extraordinary second chance at motherhood that life has granted me. For the opportunity to witness the blossoming of a life others considered not worth living. For the privilege of being not just an observer, but an active participant in this story of redemption and triumph. If you've made it this far in this story, perhaps you too know this kind of love. Maybe you've been the one who loved unconditionally, or perhaps you've been the one who received that love when you needed it most. Either way, I hope our story touched your heart, reminding you of the transformative power we all have when we choose to see potential over problems, blessings over burdens. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, tell me, have you ever witnessed the power of unconditional love transforming a life? Remember, sharing our stories is a way to extend this network of support and understanding to others who may be going through similar situations. Together, we can create a world where no one is considered a burden, where every life is valued for its infinite possibilities, where true love triumphs over prejudices and superficial limitations. Because the most important lesson Tyler and I have learned on our journey is that, ultimately, it's not our circumstances that determine our destiny, but our response to them. It's not our imperfections that define us, but our ability to transform them into strength. And it's not blood ties that make a family, but the bonds of the heart, forged through shared challenges, joys celebrated together, and love that chooses to see value where others see only flaws.